Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Open Door Show from Property CEO. My name's Ian Child, and for the next half an hour or so, I'm going to be shedding some light on some far-flung corner of the world of property and, hopefully telling you something useful in the process. So, what's Open Door all about? Well, it's your chance to take a dive into the world of small-scale property development. On Open Door, we talk to the movers and the shakers out there, all in an effort to give you the lowdown on what's happening in the world of property. We also look at any areas where we think there could be a good opportunity for new developers to take a look at. Now, as a property development training company, we also get to see all sorts of issues that students encounter on their journeys. And so the other thing we like to do on Open Door is shine a bit of a light on some of the challenges that can get in the way for a lot of people, and hopefully share a little insight on how people can overcome them. Now, in this episode, I want to look at an area which I think is rather underserved. Other people might have a different opinion, but I believe it's underserved, and it could certainly be very lucrative if it was done well. And that subject is deal sourcing. Now, before you all shout at the screen and say, Ian, we've heard about deal sourcing. We know all about deal sourcing. Deal sourcing is as old as the hills. What are you banging on about? I'm talking specifically about deal sourcing in property development. So, yes, there is a very vibrant community of deal sourcers looking to secure opportunities for investors. So typically looking to find perhaps vendors of residential properties off market and then looking to sell them below market value to cash purchasers. I'm not talking about that market at all. I'm talking very specifically about development. So what I'm talking about here is finding deals that are going to be attractive to property developers, where typically one would expect perhaps the tickets to be a little higher in price, and therefore potentially the commission's a little higher to boot. So what is deal sourcing? Okay, so deal sourcing is pretty much kind of what it says on the tin. So what we're going to be doing is finding an opportunity, a property that's for sale, and finding and matching it up with a buyer. Now, I've found that the provenance of deal sources can be a little mixed. If I'm honest, hopefully nobody's offended by that, but I have come across deal sources that do little more than just sort of send you estate agents' particulars. Well, if I'm doing my job properly, I will have already seen it. So they're not really adding a massive amount of value. At the other end of the scale, and this is by far more common, you end up with deal sources who are doing a grand job, more kind of like deal packaging, perhaps, rather than deal sourcing. There's probably a better name for it. So what they're doing is they are looking to find an off-market property, in this case, a commercial property or a piece of land, and they're going to have a conversation with the owner. So it's not for sale at the moment, but they're going to try and persuade the owner to sell, because a developer typically is going to be able to pay more for a property or piece of land, particularly property, than that is worth on the open market in its own current state, if that makes sense. Then, of course, what they're going to do is they're going to kind of secure that opportunity, package it up, and then sell it to the highest bidder. And the highest bidder will simply be there from their network of developers that they know, that they're talking to, that they're circulating that to. And then, of course, as a result, if they're successful, they will take a fee on completion. Now, why would deal sourcing be attractive? Well, I think there's a few reasons why it stands out. The first thing is that there's a low cost of entry. There are a number of opportunities in the world of property for people that don't have a great deal of cash to be able to kind of effectively take advantage of the property market without having to invest a huge amount of money. And there's lots of strategies for doing that. And if you get educated properly in the world of property investment, you will doubtless come across them. Deal sourcing, in many respects, falls into that category because, of course, what we're not doing here, we're not buying a property. We're simply acting effectively as a broker. We've found it, and that's hard work in itself. So we've managed to find it. We've also secured it. So we've perhaps we placed it on an option. for a certain period of time. So it's now secure. It's now ours. The vendor can't sell it anywhere else. And our job now is to go out and find a buyer. But there's no investment. I'm not putting in a deposit. I'm not buying the property. I'm not getting a mortgage or any commercial lending. So from that perspective, it's relatively inexpensive to get into. I think the other thing is that you don't have all the other bits that go with the territory. So if you're a landlord, for example, then you're going to have to, obviously have a mortgage and all the rest of it potentially, but you're also going to have tenants, and you're also going to be owning that building for potentially quite a few years. One would suppose. You've got all the regulations to deal with, all the testing you have to do on all your electricals, all of the health and safety stuff, and a whole raft of other stuff besides. We're not doing that. So deal sourcing, you don't have to do that. And likewise for a developer, you're going to have to build it. And we're not doing that either. So our bit stops quite early on in the process. As soon as we've actually passed it on, then effectively we get paid, and the developer then goes and does their stuff, but we simply go and hit the beach because we've actually done our bit, or we move on to the next deal. Now, why is it a good opportunity for developers? Well, developers are no different to anybody else when it comes to people trying to make money from the world of property. They want deals, they want opportunities, and nobody has the monopoly on where the best deals are. There's certainly lots of things on the open market, but what we're talking here is about stuff that's not on the open market. So we're talking about properties that aren't actually for sale currently. Now, there is a kind of potentially fairly obvious question that crops up at this point, particularly for those that are not familiar with property development, and that is, well, if it's not on the market, then it's not for sale. And if you're deal sourcing, how on earth are you going to persuade somebody to sell their building? The main reason is money. So in the same way, I always use this example, is if somebody was to knock on your door today and it was a local property developer and they said, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm really interested in having a conversation with you because I have got an opportunity to do a development here. I'm very keen on purchasing a number of properties. Yours is one of them. I'm prepared to pay £200,000 more than your property is worth, than the market value, because I'm that keen to secure it. Now, you'll be thinking, there'll be a little dance going on inside, but also one suspects a little bit of a skepticism and nervousness and anxiety and wondering, is this for real? But assuming that it is, we kind of take it on as read that there's no, that's what property developers do. They kind of buy properties, knock them down, build a housing estate, and make lots of money. So it's not surprising then that they can pay a premium to acquire the properties that they want. And you kind of think, well, you've got them a little bit over a barrel because there's a premium for your property because they want it. And why shouldn't you be the recipient of a bit of a windfall? So providing you've done your due diligence, and of course you would, you might be very happy to sell your property, even though prior to that knock on the door, you weren't thinking of moving. Now, exactly the same thing applies to commercial property. Of course, there may already be a business in there, may be let out. There's all sorts of different scenarios. But in its essence, there is a property there that's worth something. And it's worth something initially as a commercial property. So if it's a bit of a tired old shop, it is worth something to somebody. It has a value for those looking to rent or buy a shop. That's how its value is basically calculated. But there is another value, and it's a higher value that is ascribed to, from a developer's perspective, if you're going to convert that shop into residential. Same thing applies for any type of commercial building. If you are going to convert something to residential comes at a premium. Therefore, that property is worth more to you than it is in its current state on the open market. And that then creates that opportunity for us to make a margin. We can afford to pay more than that property, more than the value of that property on the open market, in order to try and persuade the owner to sell it to us, and we'll still make a healthy profit. Now, there's a whole process, one that we teach for how you go down that route and how you work out what a property is worth. But the principle there, I just wanted to make sure you understood it, which is that, yeah, property developers are typically able to pay more, the top dollar for a building or a plot of land because of the nature of what they're doing. They're building residential and so can typically create a scenario where they could pay over the odds for a property and still make a very healthy profit. So that's the principle. Why does it work in property development? So the deal sourcing, kind of the vanilla deal sourcing, I suppose, that we see in residential is people putting out kind of leaflets and stuff and trying to encourage people that are looking for a quick sale. Perhaps their situation has changed financially or whatever, for whatever reason, and they see some advantage in perhaps having a quick cash sale as opposed to putting their property on the open market and letting time pass by without the certainty of a quick sale. Obviously, below market value means that you're typically acquiring those properties at a discount. Here, it's not quite the same thing. So we're not looking for people necessarily that are in a particular situation or other. We're doing it. Typically, it's going to be based purely on that gap between what the building is worth to them and what you can afford to offer for it. Now, in development, a building doesn't have a fixed value. In residential, typically it does within a spit. You know, if you've got a 3-bed semi in this street, in this town, then, okay, it might be a bit run down or it might be like a shiny new pin. But within a spit, it's going to be worth a certain amount of money. And all the estate agents that go around and value it will value it pretty much the same. But here's the deal with commercial property. Commercial property has a different value based on what people are going to do with it. So just giving you that example where we're going to be potentially, as a developer, I'd be able to pay more for it. So to me, I can pay more for it. It's worth more to me than it would be to somebody who's got a retail business that's looking to to put it in a shop because I'm going to do something different. The other, taking that one step further, and this is a critical point, it's not just about if you're going to develop something, it's worth more. It's what is the development that you're going to do? And so a developer, when they look at a building, each developer sees something different. Many will see the vanilla, which is the obvious thing. We just put 2 bedrooms, 2 flats upstairs, and we do this, we do that, and boom, it's done. The more enterprising developer will know how to do something more than that. And if they're able to sweat the asset more than their competition, it means that they'll be able to get more out of it. It means one of two things, or potentially both. They can pay more for it, in which case they're most likely to win the deal, or they're going to make more profit out of the back end. Now, where are these variables that give a commercial deal sourcer, the opportunity to kind of sweat that asset more than perhaps other deal sources or other developers? There's a few places. One of the key ones, I would say, is permitted development rights. We've recently, in the last few years, had a sort of a storm of permitted development rights descend upon us, which is all great. It's all really good news. They're all different, and there are ways in which you can put certain permitted development rights together, which we call daisy chaining, which enables you to kind of take advantage of more than one permitted development right in your project, and get to an outcome that you would otherwise have thought on face value wouldn't have been possible. And there are, even within permitted development rights, there's quite a few grey areas. There's quite a few ways of cutting the cake in a way that perhaps isn't vanilla. It's all a bit tutti frutti, but it's absolutely the right side of the line and meets all the requirements. But it's those little kind of tips and tricks and understanding of that enables you potentially to come up with opportunities that other people won't be able to find. I think the other thing that is really important is how you carve up buildings. Again, this is something that we see quite often. People do to varying degrees of success. A practiced eye gives you the opportunity, just like in any discipline, really, to kind of do a job and even look at a property and carve it up in the most efficient and effective and profitable way possible. Whereas those with less experience do something a bit more obvious and miss out on the opportunity. They can only get 5 flats in, and we can get 6. Well, when you're looking at the way in which property development, where you make your margin, typically, if you're building 5 flats, your margin is going to be in that 5th flat. So if you've got 6 flats, you haven't just got a 6 extra, you've got quite almost double. So it's a significant uplift if you can do that. And again, if you know how to do that, that places you as a deal sourcer in a place where when you look at a property, you can see a little more than other people can see. And also, I'd say one of the things, finding off-market deals is hard work, as you'd expect it to be. There's not a place where you can go to find off-market deals. You have to do the legwork. It's not as convenient as simply popping on Rightmove or speaking to your local agent. These deals, that there isn't a pot of people with their off-market deals just waiting to be tapped into. That doesn't exist. You have to go out and find them. And of course, it's hard work for you. It's hard work for developers. So it's going to be something that is highly appealing to property developers because, of course, you're doing the groundwork, the hard work, the hard yards that they then don't have to do. You're in that situation where you are going to be sort of shortcutting the process for them, and that's going to be a kind of a massive advantage from their perspective. So what is it that you kind of need to know when it comes to being a deal sourcer for commercial property? Well, as I said, probably the clues in what I've mentioned before. You need to understand the art of the possible when it comes to sweating that asset. So when you look at a building, you need to be able to see, does it have an opportunity, first of all, to create an uplift? So are you able to offer the owner more than it's worth? And how are you going to do that? What is the best way of sweating the asset? So that means that you need a fairly solid understanding of permitted development rights. You don't need to be a planning consultant. You will have a planning consultant, and I definitely recommend that you have one to double check what you can and can't do when it comes to a particular deal. But what you will need to do off your own bat is be genned up on the permitted development rights that exist so that you recognize, you know what you're looking for, and you kind of recognize, you know the art of the possible when you look at a building. It's not a case of simply kind of looking it up in a book after you found a property. You want to kind of be genned up on this stuff so that you know what you're looking for in the first place. The other thing that you'll need to get good at is something called block planning. Now, block planning is a skill that we teach on our main program, and basically it's all about how you can maximize the space in a building. So, as I kind of alluded to, when you're faced with a building that needs potentially, let's say, converting into flats, then you kind of got generally a lot of options. I mean, you could have 1-bed flats, you could have 2-bed flats, you could have ones that have, you could put a flat in this corner and that corner, and one over there and one over there, or you can kind of carve them a different way. And maybe you've got extra stories. Maybe you could have 4 stories or 3 stories, or maybe it's just 1 story. There's all sorts of things that you could do. You need to include things like bike storage and places for bins, access, maybe parking. So there's all sorts of variables there, and there isn't a perfect way of carving up a building. You've got to comply with space standards, even when you're doing a permitted development scheme. So you need to understand those kind of metrics, but in particular, you want to be able to learn how to do block planning. Now, block planning is relatively straightforward. Let me just explain it. In essence, what you're doing is you're creating a scale floor plan, just the outline, if you like, of the building. You are going to photocopy that or save it as a kind of a default, as a blank, as a starting place. And then literally you're going to print it out. And then you're going to start drawing on it and trying to work out the best way of carving that building up to get the maximum value from it. So at a very high level, that would be obviously if you can get extra flats in, hey, happy days. But also it's more subtle than that. It's, are you able to make use of the kind of the roof space in any way? Could you create some sort of storage up there, maybe an office? Um, what are the other ways in which you can make better use of the building? And it won't necessarily be something that you get right first time, because there are so many ways of doing it. But ultimately, with a bit of practice and that knowledge of how to do it, it really can pay you dividends. Not least of all, because of course you would be able to do it kind of roughly freehand anyway, but then you'll have to go and see your architect to work out whether it actually works. And of course, they're going to take a week and charge you some money. So if you can do this yourself, it really isn't rocket science, but there's ways of doing it and doing it properly. That is going to serve you so well, because you'll get very adept at being able to work out how to sweat the asset of a building and get the most profit from it, most out of it over time. It's experience really does pay dividends when it comes to block planning and getting the most out of opportunities. Another thing that you'll need to learn how to do is your due diligence. Again, in this modern age, we live in a world, in the internet age, where so much of the work for property developers can be done outside the 9 to 5, which is brilliant, because it means when EastEnders is on, pick another show if you don't like EastEnders, and you don't want to watch it, then you could be on the sofa doing your due diligence. You could do it in the middle of the night. You could do it first thing in the morning, last thing in the evening, any time other than 9 to 5. You are able to do your due diligence, because so much information is now on the web. We've got our good friends at Google who do Street View and Satellite View and everything else, so we can kind of really look at the ins and outs of a property before, well, as we're doing our kind of due diligence. So we're not just governed by having to go out in a, bear in mind, we don't have any estate agents particulars for these properties. We don't have to go out in a car and look at it. We can actually see it on Google. And of course, we can look on the planning portal and see all of the planning history, other things that are coming onto the market. We can look on Rightmove and see what other flats are for sale, Zoopla as well, and the local estate agents and other property portals, to see what's around and what sort of values, what sort of size, do they have parking, do they not have parking? All of that sort of good stuff enables you to be able to build a picture of what your units would be worth if you were to, if this property was to be converted into residential. And so that is absolutely essential. You need to get to a place where you can kind of work out what that cost is going to be, what those numbers are likely to be, so that when you have a conversation with the owner, you're able to be relatively confident that the value that you're likely to get them for their property is the number, roughly the number that you have in mind. You're also going to, as part of that, need to know how to crunch your numbers. So you're going to have a deal analyzer that enables you to kind of work backwards effectively. So you'll be working out the cost of doing the development. You'll be kind of looking at it with the developer's kind of eyes and seeing what the developer can ultimately make out of it, and therefore what they'd be prepared to pay for it. And so you need to do that same due diligence that a developer needs to do, and that same number crunching that a developer would need to do if they were actually building it out. You need to have a system. I would say having a system is absolutely essential if you're going to be deal sourcing, as it is if you're going to be developing. A lot of what we teach is all based around systems, because that just makes life a lot easier, makes it a lot quicker, a lot more efficient. And it's so easy. There's so many properties that you'll look at. It's so easy to get confused between one another, and you don't want to do that, particularly when you're talking to owners. Because, of course, you don't want to be talking to Tom about 24 Acacia Avenue if it's actually Deirdre's property and that was the person you were speaking to the day before. So need to make sure that you've got a system around it. You need also to understand how you can secure them with the vendor. That's absolutely critical. So there is no point in having a conversation with the owner of the property, only for them to go and talk to somebody else, another deal source, an agent, or put it on the open market, because then you've lost your opportunity. You've lost that exclusivity. So the idea here for you as a sourcer is to make sure that you've kind of secured the opportunity. You can do that with an option, whereby they agree to give you exclusivity for a period to basically sell the property on their behalf. They're not obligated to sell it if you find the buyer, but ultimately, at least it gives you that opportunity to be able to secure it in the knowledge that nobody's going to kind of pull it out from under you. And likewise, if you talk to a developer, and let's just say it was a developer that was perhaps had dubious morals, and they decided, oh no, well, I'm going to cut you out and I'm going to go direct. Well, again, if you've got a legal agreement with the owner and you've got a good rapport with the owner, then why would they cut you out? So ultimately, being able to not only know how to get in touch and approach the owners of properties, but how to secure the opportunity once you know it's X and once they're the owners in a market for selling. And of course, the flip side of that is that you don't just need to find people with properties to sell. You also need to find people that want to buy those properties. So that means that you need to network in the developer and investor community, which is a very vibrant one. I can testify to that, certainly as far as propertyCEO is concerned. But there are obviously lots of developers out there. And what you need to do is to be able to kind of build that network and get a good understanding. Again, it's a database job. It's building that rapport for sure, but it's also understanding that when you've got a certain type of property that's a certain value come up, you know which of your the people on your database as potential buyers, you know who are going to be the best people to call. That's effectively like your kind of go-to list, your black book. Who are the people that are going to get that first phone call from you because this deal's come up and it looks it's kind of right up their street. So that's another part of the job here is to build that rapport, build that network, and be kind of proactive and be viewed very professionally. And of course, the final part of that is when it comes to the sale itself, is how to structure the sale. Making sure that everybody is comfortable in terms of the way the pack is put together, the due diligence that you do, all of the information that you collate and pass on to the developer, the way you represent the deal, the way you represent yourself, all of that stuff needs to be above board. And again, it's a system, be a template for how you do that. And effectively some instructions that you've got for yourself in terms of what you have to do with the vendor, what you have to do with the buyer, and so on and so forth. So that's deal sourcing. What does it pay? It varies. I mean, if you were to say it's typically a small percentage of the selling price. So of course, and the selling price in this context is what the developer is paying for the property. So obviously they're going to then go on and do a development. You don't typically take a share of that. That's the developer's spoils. And let's be honest, that's where the lion's share of the profit is. That's why the developer's doing it. But let's just assume, for the sake of argument, if we were to use 3% of the selling price, payable on completion. I mean, you can have negotiations where potentially it could be paid in different arrangements, but let's just assume on completion. So if you secure a property worth £500,000, then obviously your 3% is going to be 15 grand as a sourcing fee. So you probably worked out then, find a couple of those deals a year and you're already kind of up to the sort of national average wage, 30 grand. And of course, bigger deals will have a bigger fee, smaller deals have a smaller one. And the more you do, really, it's a numbers game. Now, I think it's fair to say, whilst the majority of our students want to develop property themselves, sourcing is a great tool to have in the armory. I mean, people would normally want to develop because instead of making £15,000 as a sourcing fee, those people would probably go on to make 200 grand plus profit from the same deal by developing it out. So that's the reason for them to do that rather than deal sourcing. But how great it could be as a developer if you can sell deals as a sourcer as well. So you're looking for your own deals and to develop out, but you come across stuff that it isn't up your street, or maybe the timing's not right, but you can then package them on and sell them on to other developers. So you get these chunks of money coming in from doing that, as effectively a bit of a sideline, and it's almost like the offcuts from your own business, stuff that you don't want, and you can kind of pass on and try and monetize it. So it's an opportunity for people not just that are looking to get into property who don't want to do development. It's also a great opportunity for developers to be able to have a second string to their bow by being able to pass on deals that don't actually, perhaps for whatever reason, don't work for them, but they can then sell it on to something else. There we go. Hopefully that's given you something to think about when it comes to deal sourcing. There are commercial deal sources out there, of course there are, but I think there is a lot of opportunity. In terms of what I see in the market for particularly people that have that knowledge about permitted development rights, about block planning, about how to sweat the asset really well. That is something that kind of really does set people apart. And of course, it gives the people that know how to do it a massive opportunity because money talks. They can simply pay more because they can get more out of the opportunity. So that's just about it for this episode. As ever, it would be great to hear what you think. So please put any comments down below. If you're interested in finding out more about small-scale property development, we've put together a free pre-recorded training session, which tells you what it's all about, and of course how you can get into it. It's available for a limited time. So if the link that I'm about to give you doesn't work, then it's always worth contacting our help desk, which is support@propertyceo.co.uk, and they'll tell you what training is currently available. So the link you need is propertyceo.co.uk/SFR, where SFR stands for six-figure roadmap. Basically, as I said, we'll show you how it's possible to make six-figure profits from these kind of smaller development projects, stuff that sits kind of towards the bottom end of the scale of property developments, which is a great opportunity right now. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Open Door. If you did, it would mean a lot to us if you could hit the like button. And if you subscribe, the lovely people at YouTube will do their usual thing and make sure that you kind of get alerted each time that there's a new episode released. That's it from me. I look forward to seeing you again very soon.